I was thinking last night about my journey of learning and understanding history, knowledge. I started history when I was really young. Most of us do. It starts with the Bible, right? So from the Bible, you get all these different stories, and some books were missing, right? Some books were missing. Well, as I got older, I started becoming more and more interested in history, Black history and so forth. I ended up reading this book called The Deconstruction of Black Civilization. That took me to Egypt. That took me to Kim. That took me to um, places I never had really thought of or imagined that I would see myself. The further I went, I ended up finding Thoth, the Atlantean, right? They talked about this being that created writing and so much in Egypt. But why was his name Thoth the Atlantean? So I ended up finding the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. And in that book, he says that they had spaceships. They had spaceships. So I'm like, okay, so this is Thoth the Atlantean. He's all over the walls in Egypt. If you go to Egypt with me in October, you'll see Thoth the Atlantean everywhere. They call him Tehuti there, but his name, and this is where I think the Afrocentric movement got a lot of things wrong because they didn't want to talk about these beings being real beings, right? Um, anyhow. So I'm like, all right, so I'm reading these Emerald Tablets and Thoth is talking about spaceships. So I'm like, okay, so he was in Atlantis. But if they had spaceships, that means they had discovered or explored space at some point. But we constantly think of Atlantis as this water type civilization. But Thoth is talking about spaceships. He really doesn't mention water too much until he talks about Atlantis sinking. He says Atlantis sank and then he went to Egypt. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, we have to go further. There has to be more. So then I ran up on the Anunnaki. And in that text, I realized that Thoth was Nin Gish Zeta. And he had a brother named Marduk. Marduk actually is Amun Ra. All right, so now we got some things tied together, right? We got these texts from ancient Egypt. Then we have this text from Atlantis, right? And even the text from ancient Egypt, they talk about a flood. They even talk about a flood there. Um, so we got the Emerald Tablets that talks about space, and now we got these Anunnaki characters, and we have Thoth right there. As I began to read more and more, I realized that these stories that were written about the Egyptian gods and goddesses were really, they are Anunnakis. They are. So if you go and you read chapter 11 of the book of Enki, I'm actually going to read this chapter. You're going to realize that you're going to hear about Asar, Set, Offset, and Heru in this text. In this text. That's why we got to go a little bit deeper. It's so much more to this. So let me read this real quick. For the next Shar, 3,600 years, peace was kept, but it didn't last for long. One of the king's sons had two sons. One lived inland with his father, and the other was living by the spaceport. The son by the spaceport became jealous and greedy. He thought his father would leave his lands to the son that lived by him. So he and his wife planned to murder the brother so he would inherit the land. They gave a party, and when his brother fell asleep from drink, they put him in a coffin and threw him into the sea. He was not found until he was dead. The grief stricken wife vowed revenge and took semen from her dead husband and impregnated herself. She raised the son to do her revenge. The son grew and was trained. He raised an army.